is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you from the clubhouse, hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. I got no joke today because we literally just thought of the topic, Stu Horvath.
Yeah, you know, I'm just sitting around being like Hambone's like, hey, you want to record? I'm just like, I wanna, but my brain has not come up with a topic yet. So.
Flying by the seat of her pants. Hell yeah. How you doing today, Stu?
Pretty good, hanging in there. It's cold out today, man. I was my face fell off a little bit in the wind. I didn't.
Yeah, I mean it's wild how bipolar our weather is. Because then, a week back, it was like, it's like 60.
Yeah,
whatever.
Nah. I mean, my beard froze walking a kid to school. I hate that.
Yeah, it's the worst. What are we talking about today?
We're talking about a book called A Fantastic Bestiary: Beasts and Monsters in Myth and Folklore by Ernst and Johanna Lehner. From 1969. Okay, so I'm working on a book about monsters, so I have monsters on the brain more than usual. And the idea for the book is to take the monster manual, the original monster manual, and to a certain extent Monster Manual 2 and Fiend Folio.
Right.
Take that pool of monsters and kind of work back to see where they came from, their origins in myth, literature, wherever. There's a lot of weird stuff that I've come up with. One of the things that I found is this book. It came up because I was trying to figure out why in Dungeons and Dragons, the Gorgon has nothing to do with Medusa, which is a separate monster.
Oh.
Yeah, the Gorgon in D&D is a bull that breathes green smoke that will turn you to stone. So I don't want to spoil, like something that's in a book from 400 years ago. But there's this other kind of Gorgon that kind of crops up. It's a mistake, really, in Four-Footed Beasts by Edward Topsell, which is a really important, monster book from the 1600s. He kind of conflates the Catoblepus with the Gorgon. Catoblepus, as you might know, is a sort of swamp wildebeest that is so ugly it will strike you dead if you meet its eyes. Also in the Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual. But the interesting thing about the Gorgon as it appears in the Monster Manual is that it really has this idea of it's iron plated. It's not just a bull, it's a metal bull. And I was trying to figure out why that is. Because the Libyan Gorgon that Topsell talks about is just it's like a bull or again like a buffalo kind of thing, but it's squishy. It's not made of metal. Turns out that this book, A Fantastic Bestiary, is to blame. John Peterson has an article over on his website, Playing at the World. It's back in 2014 where he talks about A Fantastic Bestiary. And he points out that in the back of the book, it references the Libyan Gorgon and calls it ironclad, which is, I think, as far as I know, until Dungeons and Dragons, the only place the Libyan Gorgon is referred to as being iron.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, a lot of the things you're describing, it's kind of the antithesis of what I've grown up knowing.
Right?
Even from cinema,
So the Gorgon, the Libyan Gorgon, the Sioux monster, the Chirin, and the Quotal all appear for the first time in Dungeons and Dragons in the original Dungeons and Dragons supplement, Eldritch Wizardry, which is 1976. And all four of those monsters also appear in A Fantastic Bestiary. And there are sort of textual clues that seem to indicate that, whoever wrote Eldritch Wizardry, I think it's credited to Gygax and Arneson, but, the authorship of these things, I don't know off the top of my head. But
hinky at best.
Yeah, there are textual clues within A Fantastic Bestiary that seem to indicate that this book was on the shelf of the people who were preparing that Eldritch Wizardry. Really the best one aside of the ironclad Gorgon is the Chirin, which basically is like a D&D thing. There is a fantastic creature from Japanese mythology, but it is almost always referred to as a kailin.
Yeah.
But in D&D, it's a kairin. And also in this book, it's a kairin. And it's sort of like a cloud horse, or sometimes sort of a flying unicorn of Eastern origin. But I think the more interesting. So let me talk about the book itself a little bit. We've sort of established the potential connection to Eldritch Wizardry and the Monster Manual. It's a book published in 1969 by Tudor. It's a big, nice hardcover, and it's not really a book of monsters in like the traditional sense of like the encyclopedias or dictionaries of monsters that I like, where it's like, oh, here's like an alphabetical listing of like every cool monster you can think of from mythology and legend. This is more akin to a Dover clip art book.
Oh, yeah.
The monsters are arranged by sort of type. Chapter 1 is dragons. Then you have chapter 2 is oriental dragons. Then you have serpent monsters, terrestrial monsters, aquatic monsters, denizens of the deep. I'm not sure what the difference there is. Aerial monsters, a whole section on maligned animals, which includes the hedgehog, which I think is really funny.
That is super funny.
And then benign monsters, which includes the dolphin. Chapter 10 is medieval Martians, and then chapter 11 is monstrous mutants. And they are all illustrations from historical sources, some taken directly, some redrawn. Very, very similar to another book put out by Dover, by Richard Huber, which I think we've talked about here. I've definitely posted about it. The Treasury of Fantastic and Mythological Creatures, 1,087 renderings from historic sources. If you're familiar with that book, you're basically familiar with the format of this earlier book. This book has a lot more, I wouldn't say a lot more, but there are text passages that sort of provide a bit of context for the monsters that are portrayed. But I was struck looking through it, and that little bit of text really, really does change the vibe of the book compared to something like the Huber book. Because the Huber book is just like page after page of like awesome pictures of monsters. And then there's a little key at the bottom that sort of tells you where those monsters are from. But it doesn't provide any further context as what you're looking at. A Fantastic Bestiary does. And it's black and white, all these strong illustrations, maybe 4 to a page from historical sources. And it's just wonderful monsters, page after page of them. But then with a little bit of text explaining what those monsters are. So hold on to that thought.
I'm holding it.
Eldritch Wizardry. So all of the original Dungeons and Dragons books, that is the wood grain box or the white box. The monster book isn't just a monster book. It's monsters and treasure, right? And then you get the Greyhawk book is the first supplement, and it's a whole bunch of extra rules and some monsters. And same thing with the Blackmore book, and same thing with Eldritch Wizardry. You get it's very much the same sort of packaging that they used with 3E, where every book had a little bit of something for everybody, players, the DM, monsters, new treasures, potpourri of stuff for your game.
Yeah.
It was really annoying because you had to schlep all those books around because there was like a little bit from all of them that your table was using. So same thing with OD&D, but at a lesser scale because there were just fewer books and a smaller, form factor. Eldritch Wizardry is probably the largest grouping of monsters outside of the original Monsters and Treasure book, but it's still, there's other stuff in there. There's new magic. There's like stuff. It's not a monster book. And I think that they had this book, A Fantastic Bestiary, and I think that when Gygax was like, I gotta do something to make sure that Dave Arneson gets as little money out of this as possible. I'm going to make Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and make it my own system, quote unquote, so that I don't have to pay Dave or anybody else royalties because I wrote this. I think that he sort of was thinking to himself, I have this book, A Fantastic Bestiary, and it's a big hardcover book full of black and white illustrations for every monster with a little bit of text. And I think that there the two paths meet. I cannot say this for sure. This is pure speculation, but I think I believe that if A Fantastic Bestiary didn't exist, I do not think that Gary Gygax would have produced a monster manual as we know it in 1977.
Really?
They feel so similar. There's something about it. They vibrate on the same frequency. And you can see that All the World's Monsters from Chaosium, which came out, it barely beats Monster Manual to shelves, is a couple shitty illustrations and mostly stat blocks and text. Same thing for the Book of Monsters that Little Soldiers puts out, which is technically the very first RPG monster book. It's just text with a couple illustrations. I also can't think of a monster book that is not a game monster book, just a book like celebrating monsters, quite like A Fantastic Bestiary before A Fantastic Bestiary, or really kind of since. The Fantastic and Mythological Creatures by Richard Huber comes out in 1981. And that is a similarly impactful book for monster-focused nerds of a certain age. Those are really the only two books that I can think of that are just so art forward, black and white art forward, and remind me as a physical object of the Monster Manual. And I think that Peterson makes a really compelling argument that this was on Gygax's shelf. And because of that, and because it feels so similar to the Monster Manual, I think that there's like a real resonance in form that's pretty cool.
God, I love monster books so much.
I have so many monster books now. I keep finding new ones and buying them. There's so many good, cool ones that I never heard of, and I keep finding new ones. And it's sort of like role-playing games. Like I keep finding new, interesting ones. And I have so many at this point that I really can say, I think, that there aren't many like this one. And I think it's super important. I mean, like super important in tracing like the evolution of things. Normal folks who play don't need this book, but if you like monsters and you like the 60s, like it has like a real vibe to it. It's a handsome book, hardcover. It's got like a really good back panel that has all the other art books that Tudor was putting out at the time, and like I don't want any of them, but like it just has like a vibe, and the vibe is strong, and you can get it cheap. I paid $20 for my copy, and it's a beautiful copy. Probably get it for a little cheaper without a dust jacket. You could probably go a little more expensive to get like a primo mint, but like I'm talking like $40-50. And the good people at Dover have kept it in print under a different name, which, of course, I apparently closed that window because of course I did.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. My thought here, I have several thoughts, but one thought is that like it doesn't matter what condition it's in, it's a reference book, it's not like your Arkham collection that needs to be in pristine shape and like behind the locked glass so your kid can't touch it with his little kid fingers. As the years go on, I realize how important it is to own physical media. Mm-hmm. Because as much as, when the internet was in its, infancy and early teens, everyone's like, oh, it's all there. Everything's there. They just uploaded everything. Everything's on the internet. Like, you don't need to have like the physical stuff anymore. And now as the years go on, I see more and more how the internet does not have everything. And some things just get lost to time. And so like monster books are great. And listen, as much as it sucks having a lot of books, if you ever have to move... It's cool to have handy, pull it off as a reference, have it on a shelf. The books look good on a shelf, man. Because the thing of it is, like, having old physical media is kind of like the world becoming new again, in a way, where, when we were younger, or, people were just younger in general, and things were, like, coming out, like, video games and like new styles of music and bits of art and stuff like that, only certain people had access to it because it was like almost regional in a way.
Right.
And it took a while to get to the masses where like people would be like, oh my God, yeah, I heard of that. And then some dude's like, I like them better on the first album when the 7-inch was on red, vinyl. But it's kind of like being in the know again and having some kind of mystery, because you can't find that online. You can't just Google it. It's not like in a place that like is just a graveyard for PDFs. Like it's kind of neat. It's kind of like that whole everything that's old becomes new again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's important to have physical media. Granted, I still don't regret that weekend in Vegas that I got out of selling all my CDs and DVDs. I had a hell of a time. But now, like looking back, there's like certain things I'm like, shit, I gotta buy that again. Or like, shit, that's out of print. Oh shit, if I want it, it's like $200 now. Fright Night 2 DVD, looking at you.
Yo, I had that and I sold it at Geek Flea for like $5, and it's like the one thing I regret doing in the context of like selling old stuff. Like, oh man, I had that DVD.
Yeah, because the one person who bought it definitely knew.
Oh yeah,
but yeah, man.
Absolutely.
Buy books. And if you ever go home with someone that have books on their shelves, and the words of the great John Waters, don't fuck them.
So a couple things that you maybe want to bring up. One, in the most recent issue of Unwinnable Monthly, not the February issue. Oh, wait. No, it is the February issue.
I know what's time anymore. It's a flat circle.
Coming out today as we record. So it'll be the current issue when this episode drops. The column, Maddie Chilton's column, talks about the accumulation of books as and I really Maddie was a traveler who would often, when the going got rough, would pick up stakes and go someplace else. But now she's got a whole bunch of books, and she kind of characterizes that as like not just owning a whole bunch of books, but also being like committed sort of to staying in one place because of those books, because she wouldn't be able to stand to get rid of them. And I thought that was a really beautiful way of talking about like the compulsion for book hoarding. But I also wanted to talk yesterday. I lucked out. I went on eBay. I was just like, I wonder if there's any Daniel Cohen books for sale on eBay. Of course there are. But I was hoping to kind of find like a lot, somebody selling like a bunch of them. And there was one right there. It was like $40. I got like 6 Daniel Cohen books, and they came yesterday. And I was just like, oh, this is great. Now I have like 13 Daniel Cohen books. I wonder how many books Daniel Cohen wrote. Hambo, there's a lot of books that Daniel
like
Cohen
more than
wrote.
20?
So I think that the grand total is 209 books. Only about 90 seem to be related to like weird stuff, monsters, psychic abilities, the occult. But still, 80 or 90 books is a lot of books. But the thing, I got frustrated because I couldn't find a list. I could only find like some small partial bibliographies, and then like the mush that is available on the sales sites and Goodreads. And it really annoyed me to the point where I did a lot of research yesterday, and I put together a full bibliography to my understanding of all the weird books that Daniel Cohen wrote, and posted it on the site, because like it just seems like such a failure of the internet that I can't, like, this is a dude's career that lasted 3 decades. He wrote a ton of books. A lot of them are like memorable, at least to people of a certain generation. And this is basic information. I just feel like there should be a good list of, I should be able, like the internet that was promised to me in the 90s was like, I should be able to type in an author's name 30 years later and just get a list of everything that they wrote. I don't think that that's too much to ask. And there are things like the Internet Speculative Fiction Database that are often very good at doing that. It failed with Daniel Cohen, which, in fairness, he's a little bit outside their wheelhouse. But like the fact that this just wasn't available. Dude wrote over 200 books. Like, how can we let him fall to the ash heap of history? So now it's important to kind of remember that and know that like physical media is good. And so now I'm tracking down as many books that I can by Daniel Cohen, and there's a list on the vintagerpg.com. It's right in the sidebar. I even put it on the sidebar. I was so annoyed about it. It's just like there's a Daniel Cohen bibliography, a picture of him in 3D glasses at a movie theater.
I mean, if only there was a place where they could keep a repository for all different books, as in a place where, people could go and take these books out and and borrow them and then have them in their houses so they could read them and enjoy them, maybe over a cup of coffee.
Yeah. Physical media in one place. Interesting.
Who'd have thunk it?
Speaking of physical books, Dover has kept A Fantastic Bestiary in print under a different name. You can get it right now on Amazon for $12. It's called
Really?
Big Book of Dragons, Monsters, and Other Mythical Creatures by Ernst and Johanna Lehner.
Love that.
And yeah, like you can't go wrong for $11. Now, granted, I think the 1969 version has it's just a more handsome cover. The Dover book has gradients, and I feel like gradients is a very late 90s I learned Photoshop kind of look that I don't really particularly appreciate, but you know, I'm a man of a certain amount of years, so it might appeal differently to other people.
This is true.
But yeah, so it's an interesting little footnote to D&D history, I think.
Man, you know I'm all about that, like wonderful footnotes to D&D history, and again, like, you know, we talk about how important that stuff is. Like, that's why one of the reasons why the show is so important to me, because I get to learn a lot about cool stuff that I normally would not have learned a lot about, even at those times of nights when I just can't sleep and I'm on the internet being like, oh, I wonder what happened with this. So yeah, this is pretty cool. Speaking of cool things with Vintage RPG, I just want to take a second to thank all our listeners before we go home on this episode. We've crossed over 1 million downloads, which is wild.
That's a lot of downloads.
That's a lot of downloads. Like, granted, you know, there's some out there who definitely have more than us. There's some out there who have more than us per episode. But in the end of the day, like, the fact that we've been doing this now for almost 8 years.
Something like that.
Yeah. And week over week, more and more people are listening to the show. The community is growing. And, you know, almost a decade into this, we're still able to put out great shows for listeners like you, and it means the world to us. Like, I'm not one who's out there chasing numbers. You know, I made a post about it, and I said, you know, I'm not worried about the next million. Everything else that happens now is gravy. It just feels like a good accomplishment, and it's an accomplishment we never could have made without you. So thank you. We love you, and thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Stu, you have any final thoughts before we actually hit the go home?
My final thought is that I want to apologize slightly because I feel like I was all over the place with this episode. But that's sort of how I am right now, particularly with monsters, because I'm writing a book about monsters and it's all I can think about. And I've got all these like weird little paths I've been taking with various monsters, and they all have very strange origins. So yes, sorry that this was all over the place, but if any little aspect of this appealed to you, you're going to really like this monster book because it's like this, but like more polished and constrained. So it hopefully when it's all done, it won't feel all over the place, but it's this sort of thing.
Well, there we go. And honestly, it's a book about monsters. You're going to be stoked. You got it. You can't shit a shitter, guys.
I told yesterday, I told Jamie over at Strange Attractor, I was like, you guys should commission me to over the next 30 years to write, 80 books on weird shit like Daniel Cohen. And Jamie was just like, man, you already started. Like, I can't, nobody can stop this now that it's started. And I was just like, oh no.
Listen, man, if that dude can do what, 220?
Something 209, I think was the full count, but
if he could do that many, you can for sure do like at least 50.
I especially for, young adults, like the youth audience, 100 pages each. I could do that.
Yeah. Easy breezy books.
Yeah.
Easy breezy cover girl. Love it. This has been another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can people find you on the internet?
They can find me on vintagerpg.com. As soon as I hang up on this, I'm going to write, I want to get this thing out that's just sort of like about, the waves of popularity that monsters have seen over the course of the 20th century, and maybe some thinking about why a new wave hasn't really hit in the 21st century. I don't know. I haven't written it yet, but I'm like dying to sit down and pour that out. And that will be there on Vintage RPG in addition to every daily post I've ever made. So, and all the podcasts. I mean, like, there's just such a wealth of stuff on this website for you to indulge in. 500,000 words, probably closer to 750,000 words.
Yeah, I'm sure that between that and your book, you've definitely crossed that threshold.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You can find me across the internet at John McGuire RPG. Once I get done promoting my latest Kickstarter, I will be taking a sabbatical from the internet. I'll be on the internet still. I mean, it's where I see my cat videos, but I'll be on social media for a little bit. If you need to find me, you know how to find me. And if you don't, well, there you go. A couple things of note going on right now. Mystic Punk's Dead Mall Kickstarter for Zine Quest is rocking and rolling. Squirmish. You heard us talking about Brian Collin. His Kickstarter is still going strong, I think, for a few more weeks. Yamil was just recently on talking about When the Sky Comes Looking for You. Also out for Zine Quest. Definitely check that out. And if you will, by the time this episode airs, I will be in the home stretch for my Kickstarter for Zine Quest, Avon by the Sea. Kids versus monsters in a sleepy vacation town off season. Definitely check it out. It's fully funded, but we could always use a little more money because the more money we make, the better the books will be. Check it out over on Kickstarter or wherever I am on the social media because there's links everywhere. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. And if you really like the show, want to become a patron, patreon.com/vintagerepg. We got a lot of cool stuff going on. We got a behind the scenes look at what Stu's writing. I pop some stuff about what I'm writing. We have a game at the $5 tier, which every month I run a different game from a different system. It's my way to actually force myself to try more of the games that we talk about here on the show and things that I bought that may have not made it to my table. $10 tier is Stu's legendary West Marches campaign. It's deadly, but it's fun. And we also have a killer Discord community that we'd love for you to be a part of. And early release episodes, usually get them on Friday or Saturday, depending on how late we record them in the week. Patreon.com/vintagerepg. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.